BlogTalk Radio.
Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's guest, Roy Costa. Roy is the founder and owner of a consulting firm called the Environ Health Associates, Inc. Mr. Costa is a registered professional sanitarian with more than 30 years of environmental health practice in the academic, government, and private sectors. Mr. Costa is a food safety consultant, educator, auditor, and expert with international experience. His dynamic practice specializes in the prevention and control of contaminants that may be transmitted through food, environmental surfaces, and water. Today's topic, FDA Inspections of Airline Food, Safety, and as a direct response to his interview on ABC's 2020 television program report, FDA Inspections of Airline Food. I now introduce Roy Costa. Roy?
Thanks, Andy. Pleasure to be here.
It's exciting to have you on the program so soon after your participation on a recent national televised program on airline food standards. Let's begin with that. What are airline food standards?
Well, the standards are set by FDA. These standards are found in the Code of Federal Regulations, and they govern the sanitation and hygiene of the facility, handling of the food. All the aspects of preparing safe food are contained in those federal codes, and that's what FDA enforces. So that's unlike the restaurant inspection where FDA enforces the U.S. FDA food code. So they actually go back to the federal statutes, the federal rules, I should say, to regulate the airline industry.
So the FDA inspects airline food. What are the types of inspections that they conduct?
Well, they conduct basically routine, unannounced inspections. They don't tell the folks they're coming. They will be there for several hours, if not longer, if there's a problem. They follow this up with administrative types of documents, including something called a 483 form, which states the objectionable conditions in the facility, and then they will follow that up with warning letters, and for those cases that they think need the more stringent legal authority that they have, they will take them to hearings in court. So that's the basic process for FDA.
Well, let's talk about your ABC 2020 television program report. You were recently interviewed, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. We looked at data from several years, starting in 2009 through 2012. We analyzed the violations and the types of violations that were occurring in these facilities, and we reported on them. And the findings were quite telling as to what is going on there behind the scenes in these catering kitchens.
As I look at your website, which I'll, by the way, post on the BlogTalk Radio site, it said even though that there were 1,500 FDA violations, many of these sanitary conditions were not recognized by the food providers to the airlines. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it. Basically, what happened after the show was that the airlines responded. And their response was basically that they felt that the violations that FDA was finding were, in fact, not significant, which is unfortunate because, on the other hand, this could have been an opportunity for the airlines to really establish their credibility with the flying public, and I don't believe they did that by trying to backpedal and spin the fact that they had food safety programs in place, which is laudable. I mean, it's great to have food safety programs in place, but in light of these types of deficiencies, it's very difficult to argue that those things are effective and really being that there's commitment to them. And I think that's the problem. It's not that they don't have food safety programs. It's not that they don't have auditors going in there, because they do. They have private auditors on top of FDA going into these facilities. The problem is management is not committed to upholding the basic sanitation and hygiene of the operations. And to say that they don't feel that these things are significant, I think, is really misleading.
Well, Roy, in your survey from 2009 to 2012, can you give us some specific examples of Form 483 health observations?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the reports are pretty clear here. We have evidence of rodents infestations in many, many establishments. Not just a few, but just about, I would say, 20 to 30% of these inspections indicate that there's a problem with vermin, meaning rodents. Many of them also have a problem with flies. Some breeding in the establishment itself, actually breeding in dishwashing areas. Poorly maintained doors and apertures where they're not being protected against the entrance of these pests. And this is occurring over and over again. The other things that pop out are the failure to properly clean and sanitize utensils, failure to properly store them, failure to maintain the infrastructure, the walls, the floors, the ceilings, in a way that would be cleanable and sanitizable. And unfortunately, this is the type of thing that we're hearing the airline saying, is that that's not an important issue, that the structure itself they don't consider to be important, meaning that they're focusing on time and temperature control and issues like that, and which is well and good, but they're not really looking to prevent the contamination of the food in the environment. And those types of things come back to you because you could be taking all the right steps in your HACCP plan, for example, process control, time and temperature cooking, and then expose the food to an unsafe environment and be right back where you started, or even worse. Now, I will mention that this is the second investigation that I've done on airlines. The first one was in 2010 and was with USA Today, and you might remember that was quite a very similar scenario, except that USA Today was able to uncover the fact that Listeria monocytogenes have been identified by FDA in many, many of these kitchens. And E. coli 015787 actually detected in foods, prepared foods of the airline industry. So for the industry to say that they don't have a problem and that everything is well and good, again, is wishful thinking on their part and incorrect.
Roy, what kind of lessons can other food producers take from these types of FDA inspections on their food production facilities and use them toward their benefits?
Well, I'm hoping that folks will realize that money has to be spent on infrastructure, and we're dealing with older operations here in many cases. It appears that some of the older infrastructures are really starting to show their age, and they're not being maintained. The plumbing's not being maintained. The lighting is not being maintained. And while it's well and good to have food safety programs that focus on the key risk factors for foodborne illness, time and temperature control, for example, and proper cooking, if you let your environment degrade, eventually you're going to have contamination resurfacing in your operation, and it's going to be impossible to control. If you have a listeria problem in a facility that cannot be properly cleaned, you're in big trouble because you'll never get rid of it. And, if there's something that needs to be taken from this, I think it's that.
Let me proffer for you, Roy, in your practice, is prevention the best business practice in food production?
Absolutely. And not only is it, a good public health thing to keep in mind, but I think companies that practice this could actually use it to improve their marketing. And we now see a trend towards that, where companies with a better than average program that are really committed to food safety and hygiene and sanitation are taking the next step and portraying themselves as a safe place to eat. And this is a very, very good thing. And this really runs in tandem with the idea of grades, letter grades that are now in place in certain jurisdictions around the U.S. and transparency that we really need in the food safety world. And we don't necessarily have that. Companies are not necessarily willing to divulge their sanitation records or scores. But the ones that can capture that and the ones that can do that properly, I think are going to find that they have an advantage. People generally want to know that conditions are safe. And the ones that can prove it and the ones that are willing to go the extra mile, I think they are going to see some benefit.
In all fairness, isn't food safety serious business for all, the consumers, the distributors, and the producers of food?
Yeah, it's very serious business. Unfortunately, in the boardrooms of these large corporations, these folks are many, many steps removed from what goes on within the operation. And we have people, maybe who just are disconnected. And these are the people that control the spending and the money on the capital improvements. And while what you're saying is correct, and it's a serious business, to be caught in a foodborne illness outbreak is a very, very emotionally troubling and experience for everybody involved. It's trauma for a company, just terrible. But we see people over and over again just playing with fire and eventually getting burned. And that is just, I guess, human nature, unfortunately. But we have to take this message out to them, and hopefully some will listen. And that's probably the best we can do.
Very good, Roy. I'd just like to review some of these 1,500 violations. In your interview on 2020, it noted that you had quoted, "You put that all together and you have a time bomb."
Yeah.
Can
you sure do.
That?
You sure do. And, maybe it's not tomorrow. Maybe it's, down in the future. The airlines have kind of a built-in scapegoat, if you will, in that passengers disperse themselves throughout a community, and you don't know how many of them get ill because it's difficult to report back and figure out where you got exposed, if it was that airline food or 2 meals later or the meal before. So it's difficult to really put your finger on whether or not outbreaks occur. with airline food. But eventually we're going to see it because the conditions for things to go wrong are there. And it's just a matter of the wrong things happening in tandem, and you'll have a plane load of sick people.
Excellent. Roy, as we summarize your 2020 interview, I've included the link to the 2020 interview as well as your blog link to the ABC News information. I'd just like to review a couple of brief points. One of them, and I'll just say them and you can make your comments. Ants apparently were found in these inspections. Rats. I'm looking down and I see evidence of cockroaches, some of the things that really make our skin crawl, bacteria in various, and mold in various areas. Can you comment on some of these ancillary type facilities that repair airline catering?
Yeah, well, I think what's going on there is just a failure of these companies to really deal with their sanitation issues. You've got, and the sad thing about it is you've got auditors going in there. You've got third parties going in there. You've got FDA going in there. You've got people pointing these things out to these companies, but very often it's falling on deaf ears. It's they're distracted with other things. Maybe it's an economic issue because the catering business has taken a hit in the last few years. A lot of the planes have stopped food service on the plane. So you've got an economic crunch that's occurred along with the slump in the economy in general. And so companies are feeling the pinch, and where they skimp is on these types of things. And unfortunately, we pay for that as consumers by having less than less than hygienic food.
Well, Roy, I'd like to thank you for your interview today and allow you to offer any closing remarks, and also tell us about your consultancy and your international practice.
Okay. Well, my practice is basically formed around trying to help people prevent foodborne illness by understanding the causes of it, and then developing food safety systems that minimize those risks. And that's what we do, and we do that in a number of ways. We do it through education. We do it through developing these food safety management systems and auditing operations. So we have several initiatives that we take in order to move that piece forward. So that's what we do. We help companies identify their risks and take the measures to prevent problems. We do this in food service establishments, in manufacturing facilities, in produce operations on farms, and it's a very broad practice, and it's quite rewarding to see companies that actually take this to heart and move forward and can rest assured that they're not going to make people sick. And that's our goal, is to provide that kind of assurance to companies and to the public.
Very good, Roy. And I'm sure that your experience that you gained in this audit of airline inspections from 2009 to 2012 has certainly augmented your experience base to provide your clients with the best consultations possible.
Well, thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much, and wish you a great evening.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye for now.